Hello and welcome to the first thematic session, session 2 on blue carbon ecosystems. So blue carbon ecosystems such as seagrass, meadows, salt marshes and macroalgal communities play a pivotal role in carbon sequestration, contributing to both climate mitigation and ecosystem resilience.
Through a mix of in situ ecological studies, a computational growth model of Posidonia and its carbon sequestration potential, and a socio-economic reflection on the value of blue carbon in salt marshes, this session aims to bridge natural sciences, data science, and societal stakes in the management of blue carbon.
Here we'll focus on the Mediterranean basin, especially European coastal regions, and in this session we will showcase restoration and monitoring projects that combine scientific innovation, community engagement, and regional cooperation. These represent some of the most advanced examples of ecosystem-based approaches to climate action. So we are privileged to be joined by 4 speakers today. Laura Cacacha, who's a MarWorld student at Villefranche University in the south of France here.
Alice Delamaire, Marais Zolunai, who's doing a PhD in environmental economics and ecology at the University de Rennes.
We have Joran de Gang, who's in the Netherlands, focusing on modeling of Posidonia.
And we're also delighted to be joined by Guillaume Laporte, project manager of MPAs at Blue Seeds.
Fantastic. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We'll first go to Guillaume. Please tell us about your experience with blue carbon ecosystems and how important they are in terms of the climate.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Very happy to be here and congratulations for this introduction video that you have at the beginning. I don't know if Crystal have done it, but it's really nicely done. Congrats. So yes, my name is Guillaume Laporte and I work in a French company called Blue Seeds. So we work initially on a broad topic of conservation finance. So basically supporting MPA manager and marine conservation stakeholders to find fundings and to implement new ways of funding their activities of conservation. And in the last years, we developed an entire part of the company dedicated to blue carbon ecosystem conservation through blue carbon funding, especially. So we have two different axes of work. So we work at the moment in West Africa. So you can see Marie-Cruz here. So I have 2 colleagues, Timothée and Marie-Cruz, that are currently in Guinea-Bissau to work on blue carbon funding for mangrove conservation and restoration projects. The idea is really to focus on working with local communities. So Timothée and Marie-Cruz couldn't be there because they are really lost in the forest since 10 days. We don't have any news from them actually because they don't have any access to internet at the moment, but all is fine. And the second part of our work related to blue carbon ecosystem is in the Mediterranean Sea, where we work a lot for years regarding different topics. And we work a lot on the conservation of Posidonia oceanica, which is an endemic seagrass of the Mediterranean Sea, which is very important for various ecosystem services, but especially for carbon sequestration. So at Blue Seeds, we are part, for example, of the Mediterranean Posidonia network, which is a regional network working on the conservation of the Posidonia oceanica. And at Blue Seeds, as I said in the beginning, we work a lot in conservation finance. So one of our main purpose is to support MPA in developing blue carbon credits and blue carbon funding to fund activities that are directly protecting Posidonia oceanica. And one of the main activity we are financially supporting is the implementation of eco-moorings to reduce the negative impact of anchoring on Posidonia oceanica. And I think that's all for the moment for me.
Thanks, Guillaume. I was wondering, could you expand on some of the challenges that you encounter in your work, maybe to do with policy or financing or just, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of limitation. So first of all, we work all around the Med. So in the European countries, but also in the south of the Med. So there is a huge disparity regarding what can be done and what cannot be done in terms of blue carbon fundings at the scale of the Mediterranean basin. For example, 2 years ago, we did a study that was not published. I hope I can talk about it, but it was for IUCN, and we did kind of a review of all the political, administrative, legal barriers that were existing all around the Mediterranean basin when it came to the development of what we call blue carbon markets. And we saw a huge disparity, and most of the countries in the Mediterranean basin at the moment are really late when it comes to implement blue carbon funding for Posidonia oceanica conservation, which is very different, for example, than what is happening for the mangroves all around the world. The blue carbon fundings are really, let's say, at an advanced stage, but when it comes to seagrasses, and especially when it comes to Posidonia oceanica, this question of funding is really late in terms of development. So we are trying to push to develop that and to find new ways to fund these activities of Posidonia oceanica conservation. And one, yeah, sorry, maybe I won't take too much time. I leave the floor to the other ones.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Super insightful. Let's go to Yoran. Obviously, your research is a little bit different, but it's still focused on Posidonia. So, can you give us an introduction to background, the modeling background of what you're doing?
Yeah, so what I'm doing is essentially I've been working with NIOS, which is the Dutch Royal Institute for Sea Research, on a Posidonia growth model. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is simulate the carbon and nitrogen flows of Posidonia as it grows through the year. This is in a wider project called Necton, which tries to model ecosystems for Copernicus-related services. So yeah, what I've been doing essentially is trying to understand what are the primary drivers. Yeah, this is essentially a visual interface of what my model looks like when it's output. And what I'm essentially trying to do is I'm trying to see what makes this carbon flow in this ecosystem, what creates this photosynthesis, what creates the mortality, how much is it compared to, for example, respiration. And this gives a really interesting look to see what happens in the system where, for example, in the context of blue carbon, how much of this carbon actually goes to the below ground and how much of that can actually be sequestered.
Yes, and Rowan, I was wondering if you could expand on how your models could be put into practice, or where they might go beyond kind of their modeling and their encounter with like the world outside of the university.
So this, in general, this project is kind of being done to help us understand this ecosystem. So how it's working, how it will react to future environments, future scenarios. For example, my model is kind of designed to really look at the impact of temperature and what I can have on Posidonia. But there's also many other things other than just predictions that can be used for project managers. Of course, all this sampling, especially underwater, can be really expensive. So to just have to be able to input environmental data. So what my model does, it really just looks at light and temperature data. It will still be able to give quite accurate biomass measurements, which could be really interesting for conservation and even restoration projects.
Fantastic, thank you very much. We'll go to Laura now, working in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, Villefranche. Can you tell us about your research and what you're getting up to there?
Yeah, sure. Hi. So I'm like Joran, working with Posidonia oceanica, and I'm in a research lab. So we're looking at the trying to find out about the same things as his group, but on an experimental basis. So we're looking at the two stressors, temperature and pH, that are going to change in the future, on the capability of Posidonia oceanica to store carbon, which is a very important gift they give to us. And so we have aquariums where you put a piece of Posidonia meadow inside, and then in each aquarium we have a special treatment. We have some aquariums where we lower the pH, and some aquariums where we raise the temperature, and then some aquariums where we do both to also see the effect of both stressors combined, because obviously they're never disconnected from each other. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Laura. So for some viewers who are maybe not familiar with what working in a lab is like, or working in situ, could you maybe just give us a brief sense about what an average or normal day is in your research?
Yeah, so we have some tasks that we do every day, like taking pictures of the plants to have a visual aspect. Then every week we do an incubation. This is where we stop the flow so we can measure the change of concentrations in the water, and we take water samples and then we see how much they photosynthesize, for example. And then there's small work that needs to be done, like as we can't have fish in the aquariums that eat the small algae that settle on the Posidonia. We need to clean them a little bit. And yeah, we also take sediment samples to measure chlorophyll, for example, to see not only what the Posidonia is photosynthesizing, but also the sediment, because it also belongs to the big community of Posidonia meadows.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that overview. We'll come to Alice now, and we'll go more towards the ecosystem services and socio-economic benefits of blue carbon ecosystems. So if you could expand on your research and tell us a little about your experience in the field.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. So I'm doing a PhD, an interdisciplinary PhD between economics and ecology. So I'm studying salt marshes, which is not the most famous blue ecosystems, because there are three blue ecosystems: mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes. So salt marshes are more in the temperate area in the world. So you can find some in Europe, United States, Australia, South Africa. And so I'm trying to do a comparison between salt marshes in the North Atlantic, with a focus in France and United States. And I'm trying to analyze and compare the ecological parameters to better understand their differences and similarities, and trying to link these ecological parameters to the ecosystem services provided by salt marshes. So for those who don't know what an ecosystem service is, it's all the services an ecosystem can benefit. So for example, for salt marshes, it can be wave attenuation, carbon sequestration, water filtration. And I'm trying to develop an economic model that assign an economic value to salt marshes based on the ecosystem services provided by them and the ecological parameters that can influence this ecosystem services. And I'm trying to take into account climate change in this model because they are really vulnerable ecosystem, especially with sea level rise. So that's my
Thanks, Alex. I was also, I believe that you also worked on doing some blue carbon market research prior to your PhD. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, or if there are any connections between your previous research and what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. Previously, I was in another lab in Brest, doing. I was studying controversies in the blue carbon market. So we have two kind of carbon markets, the regulated one and the voluntary one. So I was focused on the voluntary carbon market. So it's when company wants to compensate its CO2 emissions. So the company can buy credits generated by a restorative program of a mangrove, for example. And we have a lot of controversies associated to this carbon market because, for example, we can have all the additionality, social justice, accounting, environmental integrity, and carbon leakage controversies that can be associated to the carbon market. And what am I doing with salt marshes, trying to find economic valuation of these ecosystem services, is to, for example, create credit at the end, because if we don't have the economic value of a blue carbon ecosystem, we can value it on the market. So that was my previous research, because we can see, like, I think the first blue carbon project was certified in 2014, so almost 10 years ago. And since we can observe like a proliferation, multiplication of methodology to certify the carbon projects. However, as I said, we have so many controversies because it's really hard to say, okay, this project is going to sequestrate this amount of carbon and it's not going to leak any carbon, or our project is going to have a real impact, because sometimes the mangrove is already here. And so, yeah, that was this part of my research, still linked with what I'm doing today.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So I'd like to open up a discussion, and maybe we can come back to Guillaume first. And I want to start with kind of a wide question of how important are blue carbon ecosystems for the Mediterranean, and what are the biggest threats, in your opinion or experience, to them?
Well, the blue carbon ecosystem, so I will be talking about Posidonia oceanica, but in the Med, they are really, really important because, as I said first, it's an endemic species in the Med, so you cannot find this Posidonia oceanica elsewhere in the world. You will have other species of seagrass, but not this one. So it provides a lot of important ecosystem services. Thanks, Alice, for defining ecosystem services, because I didn't do it before. And so, yeah, of course, carbon sequestration, it's really important because maybe the scientists can talk better about that, but the seagrasses, and especially Posidonia oceanica, they store the carbon in what we call the mat. So it's in the floor, and you can have really, really important huge levels of mats depending on the age of your Posidonia. It's also a nursery for fish, Posidonia. So it's really important for a lot of local communities when it comes to fisheries, for example, and small-scale fishermen. And there is also an important ecosystem service of coastal protection. This is also a topic that currently a MARE student is doing her internship with us on this topic of coastal protection provided by Posidonia oceanica. So Posidonia oceanica is really important. You can find it in almost every country in the Med, except maybe in Morocco and the very eastern part of the Med, but elsewhere you can find Posidonia oceanica, and there are a lot of threats to the Posidonia oceanica. So I don't have the numbers in mind when it comes to the reduction of Posidonia oceanica in the Med, but the percentage are quite important. So a lot of anchoring, of course, especially in touristic areas where the wild anchoring is not prohibited and is not regulated. You can also have a lot of issues with trawling. You have a problem with coastal or marine pollution that can affect turbidity and also the health of Posidonia. So you have a lot of threats. We at Blue Seeds, we are focusing on the question of anchoring because unfortunately, it's let's say the threat that is the most visible one. And so we are working a lot with MPAs to regulate and reduce this impact. But yeah, a lot of impact, and I'm sure the scientists can talk about it way better than I am.
Yeah, so I just to add to that, maybe Alice can talk about some of the ecosystem services that are affected by some of these threats as well, and how detrimental that is to us.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a bit more going to focus on salt marshes because it's the ecosystem I'm studying. But for example, it's a real problem because you can have like cattle in salt marshes. So they're going to eat the different plant species you can find on it. And that's going to impact the carbon sequestration, but also wave attenuation. We also loved in France construct houses on the shoreline. So you're going to destroy the ecosystem of salt marshes to build a house. So if you remove the salt marshes, it's not going to do its services about wave attenuation or impacting like salt marshes really help against wave attenuation and so against erosions. So if you destroy this ecosystem, it's going to impact housing price, and there's a shoreline who's going to move back. So it's really an impact, and we're also going to lose all this like economic value of the salt marshes when we're going to destroy it. So that's why we see a lot of program trying to restore, mostly Posidonia and mangroves, because I think it's like on the blue carbon market, 90% or something like that of the project are on mangroves. I'm not sure we have any salt marsh projects on restoration projects on the blue carbon market, and we only have one methodology, like a specific methodology for seagrasses on the blue carbon market, which is a French one, the Label Bas Carbone. So it's most about mangroves in developing countries. But in France, on salt marshes, we're losing salt marshes. Like on the last 20 years, like 50% of the salt marshes have been destroyed, like worldwide. So it's really, really huge as a number. And blue carbon ecosystem are understudied compared to terrestrial ecosystems. So we're still missing knowledge about what will be the impact, the consequences. And that's why we need to focus on it, and we need to do some research and working like all together, not just scientists on one side, methodology on the other one, NGO. And so we need to work together to create like restoration program, studying this ecosystem to better understand how they're working, and all the ecosystem services, because as said Guillaume, salt marshes, Posidonia, and even like mangroves are nursery habitats. So they help for primary productions, for food. They help for like the woods. You can use the plants for like medicines. So it's so many ecosystem services, like people don't understand how huge it is. And when we value it on the carbon market, it's only for carbon sequestration. But the value is like more complex because you have so many ecosystem services on just one blue carbon ecosystems. And so, yeah.
Thanks. I might just jump off from Alice's point on restoration and just want to open up to Joran or Laura about what your experiences are with restoration projects. Joran, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So how Posidonia works is it's a self-facilitating organism. So essentially it creates kind of its own habitat that it's really good at growing at. So it's quite difficult to model that environment because it kind of creates this whole sediment that it really likes and gets to be able to put nutrients in. And this is also seen in my model, and it's also seen in real life where restoration projects of Posidonia have been seen to be really difficult because they are just that vulnerable in that really small colonization stage.
And then Laura, I was wondering if you can just jump in.
No, sorry, I don't really know a lot about the actual restoration projects. I'm more in the research.
Well, let's pick up on that. How do you think the research can help with restoration? It's part of kind of my own research as well. How do you think us in the lab can actually aid restoration efforts through what we're doing in the laboratory?
Mm-hmm. So the project I'm working in, for example, is part of one big European project that gathers together many small projects that work on blue carbon. And their main goal is to inform policymakers. And so whatever we find out should lead them towards good decisions. That's the main goal, I guess.
Fantastic. Okay. And I want to kind of go back to what Guillaume was saying right at the start about regional cooperation. Obviously, here we kind of want to talk about the European coastal side, but the Mediterranean is a very expansive region. So how important is it for us on the European side to have a really good kind of regional cooperation? Maybe Guillaume, you can pick up on this.
Yeah, if we focus on the European level, you will have a lot of laws and regulation that depend from the European Commission. So it's really important to have this cooperation between countries. I am especially thinking about the nature restoration law. That is it is a law from 2000. I don't remember 2000. It's really recent, from 2023 or 2024. And that this law is mentioning Posidonia and the ways of protecting it. And it's really important that there is cooperation between countries. And when I talk about cooperation, it's not only the cooperation between governments, but also the cooperation with a lot of different stakeholders. So the scientists, of course, and also the civil society, the NGOs, the marine protected areas. And that is what the Mediterranean Posidonia network that I was mentioning at the beginning is trying to do, to put all these stakeholders together and to try to develop a regional action plan to make sure that by 2030, 100% of the Posidonia oceanica in the Mediterranean Sea, is protected. And when it comes to even if it's not the topic today, but when it comes to the south of the Med, this cooperation, this global cooperation at regional level is also very important because it is also an exchange of scientific knowledge and an exchange of skills that can be really important for countries that are, let's say, a little late in some development. And there was one last point I wanted to mention about cooperation. Yeah, and also more, let's say, practically speaking, sometimes it's easier to get access to some, let's say, huge European funding program if you are partnering with a lot of different stakeholders from different countries, that if you are applying alone to some funding. So when it comes to funding project as well, sometimes it's good to have a big cooperation and to develop big projects to leverage some millions of euros.
Great, thank you. So we're nearly coming to the end of the session now. So maybe as a final message, representing blue carbon ecosystems here, maybe we're in under 30 seconds, each of you could tell us, why people should be interested and care about these ecosystems. Sometimes they feel so far away from the general public. So why should we actually, show interest in these? Maybe Joran to start.
Well, to show interest, I think, as Guillaume also already said, they have so many ecosystem services. They are almost like a lung of the Mediterranean in terms of Posidonia, salt marshes too. So many communities depend on them. So it's not just blue carbon. I think blue carbon is a really good way to help like policymakers because it's a way to translate into finances. But there's so many more things we should care about. And I think it's a really important ecosystem, and so much of the Mediterranean relies on this ecosystem. And also, we still know so little about them. I can tell you in my modeling, often I just had to guess because we didn't really know how it worked. And so there's so many things we still need to know. And this should be known if we really want to protect and conserve these services and this ecosystem.
And Laura?
Yeah, so what I found really interesting to learn was that right now their carbon sinks, so which is very important for us. But depending on how future conditions are gonna impact the Posidonia community, they could even turn into carbon sources. So that's, I think, one very important part about conserving them.
Definitely. And Alice?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Joran about how important are these ecosystems, complex they are, and they're like so interesting, so beautiful. And it's really important to remember that blue carbon ecosystem can sequestrate like 3 to 5 times more carbon than per hectare than terrestrial forest. So it's really huge. But it's also really important to remember that we have less hectares of blue carbon ecosystem on Earth than terrestrial forest, and Posidonia is has the highest rate of carbon sequestration on the 3 blue ecosystems. So it's really important to protect them, and they're so rich. So like they protect so many biodiversity. So it's really important to take care of them and to learn about these 3 blue carbon ecosystems.
I just want to thank Guillaume, Laura, Joran, and Elise for joining us and for sharing your thoughts, experiences.
Thank you.
The time to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.